Wow, it's been kind of incredible so far. I don't know how to follow James. James, thank you. That was just absolutely amazing. I guess this is what TED's all about. Great ideas, worth spreading, and stories as well. Stories are kind of ideas as well. I'd like to just think about that literally for a second. How do you spread an idea? Okay, just quite literally, on the face of it, a whole bunch of people have got up here, stood right where I am just now, people you've never met before. Noise has come out of their face, and then an idea has emerged in your head, okay? So the idea has kind of gone from here to there. So you might be able to tell I'm interested in ideas. As you maybe heard, I started out as an architect. I'm a designer. So obviously, I'm interested in where ideas come from, how we get ideas. But I'm also a researcher here at the Open University, and I've become more interested in what people actually do with ideas. And that gives me a bit of a challenge, because you can't measure an idea, okay? You can't weigh it, you can't touch it, you can't measure it. It's different in different places. It's different for different people. So that's why I am also a pragmatist. I try to find the simplest possible explanations for things, okay? I try to use the simplest bits of evidence, okay? So I'm not allowed to use magic, for example. I'm not allowed to use what Daniel Dennett calls wonder tissue. So no consciousness, no imagination, no dreaming. Believe it, there are lots of words that we use that are kind of vague. Now, you can do this really pragmatically and simple with ideas like this. Ideas come from thinking. Thinking comes from cognition. And cognition is stuff that happens in your body, okay? It's thinky stuff. It's your brain. It's your central nervous system. It's neurotransmitters, okay? And if you take this approach, a really interesting thing happens. When you measure the thinky stuff, and then you compare it to what people think they're thinking, these two things don't kind of measure up. In fact, they're way off. It turns out that we're only aware of about 10% of what's happening in our thinky stuff. 10%. Some experts reckon it's as low as 5%, okay? I mean, that's tiny. It begs the question, what the frontal cortex is happening to the other 90% of what's going on in your head? What makes you, you? Now, a lot of it's really boring, okay? So standing here, it's, keeping me alive. It's making sure that I'm still balancing. There's a lot of processing that happens in the 35 kilometers of nerves in your body. It's, I'm scanning the room. I'm looking for tigers, looking for threats. But particularly, I'm using a lot of my brain just now, just out of sheer fear. I'm just hoping that you still all love me. Thank you. Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you very much. But there's one thing that's common to all of this type of thinking. It is utterly, utterly, utterly selfish. It is dedicated to you, to the survival of you. That's not quite right. It's dedicated to the survival of you as an individual, as part of a species, okay? That little detail is slightly important. We'll come on to that a wee bit later. But this selfishness, it leads to other things. Remember, we're still talking about the 90% that you're not aware of that affects the 10%. And it leads to a whole bunch of human biases. And biases in our thinking lead to biases in what we say, to what we do. And those behaviors feed back in to what it is that we are. We are really quite biased objects and beings. Let me give you an example of one of these. When we're called out on some of these biases, we don't admit that it's the 90%. We don't admit that it's the thing that we're unaware of. We'll come up with little reasons. We'll come up with excuses to make it seem as if we're in control of ourselves. It's called motivated reasoning. Google Dan Ariely. Look at his TED Talks on this. Really, really, really interesting. Motivated reasoning is how you come up with these kinds of excuses. Let me give you an example. So I go into a shop for a pint of milk, and instead I come out with one of those, the big bars of chocolate, the ones that are the size of a child, okay? Now, I don't then say, to justify it, I don't say I am an animal, I deeply desire chocolate, the dopamine serotonin fix is great, I am an animal, give me the chocolate. I don't do that. I come up with little reasons, little motivated reasons. So for example, I've been a good boy, or I did a press-up last week, or here's the kicker, it was in special offer. Have you ever noticed how much chocolate is in special offer? I'm guessing it's not because the chocolate companies love us, okay? They're giving you a motivated reason. Motivated reasoning is part of a whole bunch of other mechanisms that we have between this space of the 90% and the 10%. It's what makes us hugely, hugely biased. And it leads to a lot of massive human fallibilities. You'll hear later today some of these as well. These biases lead to a lot of isms, racism, sexism. They lead to a lot of denial, if you like, of reality, because these are ways of us actually changing our realities in our heads for ourselves. They are what allow us to believe or to deny things that are quite literally facts round about us. So it's what allows us to, for example, deny climate change. These mechanisms are what make us fundamentally unsustainable as a species. Think about it. We evolved these at a time when we didn't have 8 billion people on the surface of the planet. And they're kind of destructive now. This ability to deny reality and prefer what it is that we wish to believe, what we wish to do. Oh, it's gone a bit dark, hasn't it? Sorry about that. See, here's the thing. Let's turn it around a bit, because we are not going to sort the problems that we have unless we do something about this, okay? Unsustainability isn't about what we do, it's about why we do stuff, okay? And I'm a designer, so let's go for a rebrand, okay? Human fallibilities, we need to do something with them. I'm going to propose that we turn human fallibilities into actual superpowers. Because one of the things you do in design, when you see a massive problem that you know you can't confront head on, you turn it through 90 degrees, or you move yourself, you look at it in a different way. So let's look at fallibilities in a different way. As I said at the start, I'm a designer, okay? And it turns out that when you do the research for motivated reasoning, designers are actually better at motivated reasoning than normal groups of people. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. My job as a designer is to make stuff up. My job is to tell lies, basically. The better I am at telling lies, you know, the more clients I'll get. But it's a purposive kind of lie. That's the point of motivated reasoning. It's not just making stuff up. It's doing it with a rationale behind it. So I will use motivated reasoning to almost push reality aside and then come up with a different idea. And as I say, the better I am at that, then, you know, the more clients that I will get. And I'm going to suggest that maybe this and a whole bunch of other sort of cognitive processes that I use as a designer are actually quite useful to other populations, to other people in the population. Because I'm only becoming now aware of the fact that I am actually able to almost kind of tap into these semi-consciously as a designer. So I'll give you another example. I have an optimism switch, okay? I am able to switch on optimism in my mind. Optimism is super cool. We evolved optimism evolutionarily as a way of denying reality round about us in order to keep surviving. So I use optimism, as I say, to push reality aside. I think quite aggressively of what a future could be and how it could be differently. And then, and this is the important bit, as a good designer, and I hope I'm a good designer, I switch it back off. Now, you've probably got a lot of designs where the designer didn't switch the optimism switch back off, okay? You probably got a few of them sitting in your pocket just now. But this and a whole bunch of other sort of cognitive abilities, I'm going to suggest that these are actually a form of cognitive superpower. I'm going to repeat a call that was made here at the Open University about 50 years ago, believe it or not, that design as a way of seeing how we can change the future by looking at the present is actually something that's useful beyond design. In fact, we might actually be wasting our time teaching designers how to design. In fact, we might be wasting our time teaching adults. Maybe we'd be better doing this way earlier in the curriculum. Maybe we'd be better doing it in primary schools. Because it strikes me that the worst thing I can give to the next generation are my ideas. They don't work. We know that. So it's maybe better if I give them these cognitive superpowers and allow them to come up with their own ideas. Because here's the thing. We are not going to change the world by just designing more stuff, by making more stuff. No matter what you hear, that's not going to happen. That's the what. It doesn't change the why. The only way we're going to change the future is by changing ourselves. And we don't have much time to do it. We certainly don't have time to evolve. But the one thing we can change is this wonderfully plastic organism that allows us to think, that allows us to create different realities. And that instead of denying realities, maybe we could come up with different ones. But to do that, we quite literally need to learn how to change our minds. Thank you very much.